literally finished season one and rolled directly into season two, which is why this season is coming out so fast. It also gave us a really wonderful gift of we were partway into shooting season two when season one dropped. And so to see this overwhelming response, well beyond what we ever imagined for season one, we were getting that was kind of fueling us while we were in the midst of a very ambitious season two. So that was really fun for the cast, for the crew, for everyone to see that there were fans out there enjoying everything we had made while we were continuing on.
Well, since you already started season two before season one had finished airing, you didn't get the full advantage of all the feedback.
True.
So, because there's always a fear, I think, among anyone when someone else is telling our story,
Mhm.
you know, whatever, even though this is a story that's both part of Christianity and yet it's still a Jewish story.
Mhm.
So, what feedback from what groups and from where did you get that you were able to incorporate into season two?
Well, I honestly think it was a lot of just validation that we were on the right track. It seems like what's great about this story is that if you're familiar with the Bible and love these stories, or if you don't, it's still so compelling. And this is sort of like one of the origin stories of the hero's journey that we all know so well. And so there's something very familiar about the feeling of this young kid plucked from obscurity, meant for a greater destiny. But the specificity of it is really unique. And if you do know the Bible and love the Bible, then it just brings to life something that's already really close to your heart. So I felt like, we definitely got the comments from people who were not happy with things we did. You're going to get that, right? And in fact, Dallas Jenkins, who's a good friend of ours and a consultant on this, he was like, "Get ready for it because you're never going to please everybody."
For
Um,
sure.
Even small things like we thought it was actually a really fun and cool detail to have David get hit with a spear from Goliath.
Yes, that stopped me in my tracks when I watched. I'm like literally going back to my Bible, going, "Was he hit by a spear?
Right.
I wasn't thinking he
Well,
was hit by a
and
spear."
and to be fair, it doesn't say he wasn't, but the thing that's interesting is of the fun of what we get to do, which is to go from what's written here and here, and there's just like there's gaps in between where you have to go like, did David walk or did he run? How long a moment was it? How many, how loud were the people? Like there's just so many things you can decide. And ultimately what we wanted to do with a moment like that, for instance, was we wanted the visual of David rising into his destiny, right? And we also didn't want the moment to seem too easy,
Mm,
right? Like, oh, he just walked. Like when you think of David and Goliath, I think it's like a little guy and a big guy, and he goes bink, and he hits him in the head, and he falls over.
and he falls
But
over.
right, but to make it epic and to give it stakes and to have him running and to be dodging spears and all this. And so anyway, that to us felt like the spirit of the story we're telling is exactly right. David has to emerge into his destiny through his own fear to stand before Goliath and take the shot. But there were definitely people right out of the gate that were not happy about that. And so, but I think that mostly people understand that our heart is exactly in the right place. We take great pains through with a lot of consultants to get things right and to honor the text and to really find biblical moments that we put in there that are verbatim, like key moments. And then there's a lot of exploration in between and discovery that is our way of servicing that and sharing the story in the same way that a pastor might tell a sermon and use their own imagination and their own life experience and story to sort of like present it. So yeah, but it was definitely good for us to see how many people were appreciating and understanding what we were doing in season one, that kept us on track for season two.
Well, when I talked to John last year, I asked him because, I'm a Catholic and I'm also a storyteller, and we have a two millennia tradition of creating art based on the Bible.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes very accurate and sometimes not. And we have a tradition of Ignatian prayer, Ignatian meditation, where you use your imagination. So this is something we're all very familiar with.
Yeah.
But when I was seeing things like David is illegitimate, and I'm like, was David illegitimate? And then the whole thing with the Nephilim, which I had to look up. I understand that David being illegitimate is from tradition. not from scripture. And
Well,
the same
and
thing with the
truthfully,
Nephilim. And
there's very little.
I'm like,
That
I
was
know,
a big conversation.
I'm like, John, you're straying from the Bible. What's going on?
The illegitimate, though, is interesting because David speaks about himself as an outcast in his own family. And there isn't, I mean, we did a lot of like digging around on like there's very little that's described about his mother. And there's rabbinic tradition about a very complicated situation that happened with his mother. There's not a lot that's known other than the way he laments feeling like a bastard or an outcast in his own family. And so that was one of those places where we had to make a particular decision to tell the story because we are bringing these human beings to life. So you have to kind of understand what is the circumstance. And because there wasn't specific clarity in that, but I know that was definitely something that people comment a lot about. But we all felt sort of like, I don't think that you can specifically say this is wrong because there's not that much that's clear about it. But it sure makes good story.
It does. I mean, I understand the demands of story. Just that on behalf of people who get more irritated when things are not taken literally.
Yeah.
Like the Nephilim thing, I had heard that. I knew that was floating around as a tradition. And of course, it gave you great visuals and a little supernatural element that was fun. So,
well, and also, by the way, like the way we presented that, and we were very intentional about this, we presented that as a story being told, not as fact.
Yeah.
Right. This was like cave drawings on the walls of like, this is what people say. But
well, Goliath was kind of large.
Yeah, for sure. Well, but it's funny when you look at the I guess there's two different descriptions of how tall they were, right? Like 4 cubits in a span or whatever they said. And some people interpret it to mean they were 7 or 8 feet tall, and some people say 11 feet tall. So we just went with the more dramatic one, which was 11 feet tall.
Sometimes you had the demands of the visual.
Yeah, and it definitely does. I also think there is a certain amount, like you said, when you're doing art and you're sharing stories, it's like you want to represent what it felt like. Like we always like to think that looking up at Goliath must have felt like he was 11 feet tall. And also other people were probably shorter back then. So, like the distinction between them. But in any case, yes, there's going to be a couple things like that. But what's important is to get the heart of it right, and the intention of it right. And we're here to serve this text very faithfully, and to celebrate it. And so hopefully that comes across. And I think it really does for so many people, like the heart and soul of David, the way he sings the Psalms, the love he has for the Lord, the relationships, his love for the king. And you'll see in this next season, his love for Jonathan, and that friendship is a really powerful part of season 2.
Well, looking at the casting of Michael, I'm sure that was very challenging. You had a lot of boxes you needed to tick for the character. But the one thing he didn't seem to me when I first saw him was, the kind of guy who would make you stop and turn on the street. It's like you always sort of imagine David being like, I don't know, Henry Cavill or something, where if he walked by, you go like, and of course, now he has to become a warrior. He's not just a kid with a sling. He's a warrior. So how has Michael grown into the demands?
Yeah, well, and by the way, we were really interested in one of the things that John and I said we feel like people get wrong a lot with this is that if David starts out already looking like Henry Cavill, then there's nowhere for him to go.
Exactly.
And the thing that's interesting about a shepherd hidden away in the hills that nobody would have ever believed or anticipated would have this future and this destiny. We wanted a kid. We really wanted to find a kid who's right on the cusp of being able to become a man. And so who also was Middle Eastern, who also had an incredible singing voice and all of these things. And there's a boyishness.
A lot of challenges there.
Yeah, but I like the fact that you never would have imagined, like when you look at this little kid facing a giant, what makes it so compelling? He's got an older brother who is a muscular warrior, who seems like he would have been the pick to be the one. David is the last pick, the one nobody expected. And so we thought that he just gave us a perfect opportunity to start there and then to grow into this warrior. So Michael's been working out and putting on muscle and training.
I was wondering about that.
In season 2, and then in season 3, even more so, I think if we get there, he becomes a warrior over the course of the season and is growing into this in confidence, and so I'm really excited about him and about how much heart and the spirit of David he brings to this role.
It's interesting because the Bible stories have been with us for a long time, but in the general span of human history and storytelling, they're reasonably recent. But there are
Mhm.
tropes that we accept now, like, oh yeah, the last shall be first.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, that didn't exist in the ancient world. If your hero
Mhm.
was born a prince, he was the half son of a god. He was something. He didn't
Yeah, that's
become
right.
something, he was something.
That's right.
And it's interesting when you look at these stories that these things that we've always told stories that way. No,
Yeah. And
no,
by the
we
way,
have not.
that's what makes this story so important because, like I said, it's kind of the first example of this, and it's one of the wonderful things we get to explore in season two, which is all the people around David, in particular his oldest brother Eliab, who is the warrior of the family, who is the
Mm-hmm.
one who's chosen, or even Jonathan, who should be the next prince or the next king. He is the perfect prince, but for them to have to accept in all of their different ways David, like, I mean, Eliab, you'll see in episode two, right out of the gate, is like,
Mm-hmm.
he's going to be the last person to accept that his little kid brother, his punk kid brother, who he's always protected as the magnanimous older one, but is going to be, this is nonsense. This is madness. This makes no sense. And it's one of the reasons why I like what you said about David not seeming like what you'd imagine, is because it makes it even easier to go, this is absolutely insane, and I will never support it, and I will never accept it. Everybody on their own path has to come to terms with the fact that David is anointed by God. And the more you see it and the more you feel it, you will have to come to accept it. But it doesn't come easily, and it's not at all the norm for that time.
Certainly not in the ancient world. Well, you can see now how much David, this story, is a precursor to the Arthur legend,
That's right.
where Arthur comes out of nowhere and he pulls the sword out of the stone, and everybody just has to live with it after that.
Mhm. Or Harry Potter, or Luke
Or Harry
Skywalker,
Potter, yeah.
or
It's become
Spider-Man.
it's like some of these. I think that, Jordan Peterson has done a good job of unpacking a lot of the things about the Bible stories that are different. Even from a storytelling and a psychological standpoint, that these things
Mhm.
we just accept like that's how a story goes. Well,
Yeah, right.
no, not before this. Of course,
Yeah, and it's also interesting because we are dealing with um, a modern audience, finding a way to deliver this to a modern audience in a way that leans into the unique specificity of the time period, but also makes it accessible, right? And
mm-hmm.
so we want this to be a family show. So, like, I mean, there's a tremendous amount of violence and also incest and really horrific things.
Well, that's the Bible.
That's the Bible, concubines and all that. So we try and find the version that's as palatable as possible.
Yeah.
But also there's an interesting thing about, like, David being in love with Michal, right? But then in order to marry Mirav, like, back then nobody gave consideration to, like, but I don't love her, like
Nobody cared.
nobody cared. But we have David is got this heart, this passionate heart, and a man who's trying to create his own destiny. And so we give enough of that, probably more than is accurate, right? But gives us a way into feeling like, I love this woman and I'm going to fight for her. Because love was real. People felt things, right?
And then you know what a dog he turned into later.
That's
in the romantic. So yeah, because we sort of know where the story goes,
That's
but
right.
you maybe didn't think through all the steps of how it got there.
Yeah, and when you're confronted with it, by the way, that the second half of our, we've sort of got two trilogies in mind for this, and we're going to jump in time to the later years of David's life if we do like an episode, a season 4, 5, 6. And John and I talk a lot about that's going to be a very different show, a very different tone, and navigating that is very tricky. Navigating, like, you're going to have to be confronted with some really bad choices, like horrific, unforgivable things that he does.
Once you become king, once you have power, it becomes a new life and a different life. And sometimes it's hard to hold on to everything you were before.
And we see that with Saul. I mean, like, we see that with Saul, of course, over the course of our two seasons. And this season, you will start to see Saul's marriage stumble and his concubines emerging. And so, like, those kinds of things start to happen. And it's a cautionary tale for David, who will, of course, later make the very same mistakes to the nth degree. But I will tell you this, we do get some fun introductions this season. We do meet a character named Uriah this season. So
yeah, poor Uriah.
Oh, poor guy.
Yeah, bummer. You're taking an awful risk. Not just you and John, the whole company is taking an awful risk with season 2, launching it as the tent pole of yet another streaming service, which is my attitude, like yet another streaming
Yep. Mine
service.
too. Yeah.
And I took a little informal poll, and people are like, no, I can get it somewhere else later. I'm not doing this, da da da. So, with that in mind, like, what were the conversations, and why did you decide to swing with season 2 and launch this whole another $9?
Well, I'll tell you why.
You know,
Really the idea was, and when Jon sort of first presented, like, part of the challenges that we find for a very specific audience that we know and love, right? There's tens of millions of people in the US alone, right? Who love a lot of great content, but don't know a single space that they feel is safe for their kids, right? And one of the things that we had to do, if we
well,
were
certainly Amazon as a whole, none of these big streaming services are perfectly
Right.
safe. That's impossible.
Right, it's impossible, and does it. And so the question became, if we were able to say, come into your household and say, look, we're going to spend some time and we're going to build for you our picks of like the things that we think you would love. And it's like if you walked into a Blockbuster Video and there was a side room that says, here's a bunch of movies, a bunch of television shows that we think you're going to love that you could watch with your whole family. And even if it's a great classic movie, Forrest Gump or, Castaway or Top Gun Maverick, whatever, that has a few things that maybe wouldn't be safe for the family, we'll give you the safe edit of that so that you know it's good to watch. And we're going to create original content for you, whether it's Jesus Revolution or American Underdog or House of David or a bunch of shows we're making. So in order to make that a safe space, an app you could put on your iPad, we made a very unique arrangement with Amazon, which was like, you can't trust Amazon or any other real streamer that's going to have the quality of content, the range of content that's as curated as this is, in a space that you can set your family down in front of and not have to worry. And so it kind of required making its own space. It does come with the risk that we all have of like yet another streamer, of course. But the thing about it is we hope that if people that,
well, first you have to have Amazon Prime Video. Then on top of that, you get that. So what was that conversation with Amazon MGM and with Prime Video, who stepped up to produce this thing? I don't know if this was decided from the beginning. A thought you had later. It was an
interesting conversation of us having to be honest and say, like, our audience can't really trust everything that you've got on your service. So we need to be a channel within your ecosystem.
Was this right at the beginning, or is this something that came later after the first season was successful?
No, it was part of the design, I think, along the way to create that safe space, right? And so they're great partners for us, and it gives us a huge platform, and we will still be able to put these things on Prime Video so people can see it that way as well. But the question is, if you want a safe space, you don't have to do it. But if you want that space, it's there, right? And so it won't be it won't be the 44 million people that watch season 1 that join this, and that's okay. They can all watch it on Prime later. It'll be whatever subset of that.
It sort of like The Chosen. We're here first, and then we're there. Then
that's right.
It will be on Prime later on.
That's right.
How later is later on?
There, I don't know.
Know?
Yeah, so less than 6 months, I believe.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm told I have to go, but
this was fun.
Yeah, we should do this again. But thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. What a great conversation. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. We'll catch you later.
Okay, bye.